What's up guys, edrone here, and today we're going to be installing our ESCs in part 4 of our Budget Basher race drone series. Stay tuned. If you check down in the description, there'll be a link to the playlist of the other parts of this series, installing the motors, putting together the frame, and installing the flight controller all in one. Now, for the ESCs, I went budget like I did with the motor. The Hack RC ESC is a 35 amp BL Heli 32 D-Shot capable 1200 2 to 5S, and this is the LED series, which has a LED indicator light. They are extremely affordable, very cheap. I got a set of 4 for around $9 a piece, which that is great. So, and as you can see, they're quite small as well, so they're not going to take up a ton of space on the arms, because we don't have a lot of space to spare. These arms are thinner, and as you can see, with a smaller ESC, it's going to fit on the arm just perfectly. Now, while the Hack RC ESCs might be cheap, they actually do have pretty good results as far as noise testing. And another popular YouTube channel, Drone Mesh, he actually tested these ESCs and called these, and he quoted, the best budget ESC of 2018. These work really well for the price. These are going to be on the arms, which are more vulnerable to crashes. So these are definitely going to be, more of a higher risk of getting damaged. So I wanted to make sure on the Budget Basher race drone, we definitely went with some cheap budget ESCs, but they're not garbage. So these got a good reputation. You'll see you have your 3 pads here for your 3 motor wires. You have a positive wire here, which is silicone, a negative wire here. You have your ground and signal wires here, and if you look right here in the middle, you'll see an empty pad. Now, this is what makes BL Heli 32 so much better than your BL Heli S or your BL Heli. So the BL Heli 32 actually supports ESC telemetry. And this pad right here, if we solder a wire from here onto a certain part of the flight controller, we will actually get ESC telemetry, which is really, really interesting. So you can get things like motor RPM, you can get more accurate amp draw versus just by using the current sensor on the flight controller. This is a lot more accurate at sensing how many amps the motors are drawing. And you see right here in the center, this is actually the LED status light that lets you know, what kind of status you're in, whether you have a fault or everything's working correctly. So very, very interesting. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pre-tin our 3 pads here for the motor wires, 1, 2, and 3. A little bit more fresh solder there. Nice shiny solder ball there. That's all you need. 3 nice shiny soldering balls there. Now, in order to get to the telemetry pad for the ESC, we're going to have to cut back this heat shrink, which is unfortunate, because now I'm going to have to put another piece of heat shrink on here. But that's the only way we're actually going to be able to get to the telemetry pad. Now you can see I went ahead and removed the sticker that was on the ESC. Now what I'm going to do is just get a rough estimate of where the telemetry wire, how long of a wire I need to get from the ESC when it's going to be on the arm of the quad to the actual pad on the flight controller. And all I'm going to use is this yellow silicone wire that was provided by the RunCam split, which I'm no longer going to be using. So that's a good thing about when you got these parts. They give you lots of wires, and you can just kind of basically reuse these wires. It's good silicone wire, and I'm going to choose yellow for this. That way I know my yellow wire is my ESC telemetry color. If I cut it right here, that's going to give me plenty of wire to get to that pad. Now I'm going to give myself just a little bit extra, just in case I run into something. But right about there should be plenty. Just take your little cutters, little snip. Now all I'll do is take the other end, which is in this pin header in this plug, and we'll go ahead and snip it off as well. Now I just use these little snippers. They work really well. Now you can see we have a decent length of wire here. And if you look down at the quad, if I solder this to the ESC, I still have plenty of wire to get to that pad. Looking at the flight controller, the ESC telemetry pad is right here. So you can see that's going to be plenty of wire for that. And all I'm going to do to strip this wire is just kind of take my little fingernails, what little fingernails I have, and just kind of pull that little sheathing back. Maybe just get a tad bit more. That's going to be about the length that we're really going to need right there. So we're just going to put a little bit of fresh solder on there and pre-tin this wire up. And this is a really good way to do these small wires. I got my heat probably like medium low, just enough to melt the solder. And all you got to do is lay your soldering iron down, put your wire right on top of the tip, and just kind of feed that solder in there, and there you go. That's it. Already pre-tinned. It's got a nice shiny little tin on there. You don't need much, just a very little bit of wire. Ever so lightly just cut that heat shrink right off like so. And now you can see we have access to our telemetry pad right here. So now that we have our pad exposed, now we can go ahead and pre-tin the pad. There we are. You see that? Got a nice little ball there, and we're not touching the positive wire or the signal wire. You definitely don't want that solder to bridge. There we go, real quick. See that? But now we have a good connection. If you don't mind soldering, you know, it's not a big deal to solder this wire. But I think it would be nice to include the wire soldered from the factory and just leave it like this. And if you don't want to use it, you can just cut it off and then put your heat shrink on it and be done with it. They should really leave that option up to you as far as that's concerned. So now we'll go ahead and put our heat shrink back on our ESC, and we're going to repeat this process for the other ESCs. I'm just not going to do it on camera. I figured I'd show you the one how we do it, and obviously it's going to be the same for the other three. So what we'll do is we'll take our little piece of heat shrink that we cut off, and we'll just kind of wrap this around the ESC here, and we'll go right over top of these wires like so. Actually, I'm going to go a little bit further and not cover up that LED there. You see now I've got fire here. There we are. That way you kind of know a little bit of the information about the actual ESC. And it should be good enough to take off 1 or 2 times and still have a little bit of stick to it. There you go. Go ahead and stick that down. And now we have basically looks like a whole new ESC again. We have our LED, and we have our new heat shrink on there, and we now have our ESC telemetry wire soldered up and ready to go into the flight controller. Go ahead and line our ESC up right about where it's going to go on the arm. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut these motor wires and get those soldered up. So I know, give yourself a little bit of slack, but right here should be plenty of plenty of wire for the ESC, and it's going to give us a little bit of extra slack just in case we ever need to remove anything. And don't throw away your wires, save them. You can use them for signal wires and other things. So we're just going to pull that sheathing back about that much. And that should be plenty right there. Now what we need to do is get these wires pre-tinned. So I just give them a good little twist with the fingers. Take your soldering iron and put it underneath the wire. And just kind of feed that solder right on in so it wicks in the wire, like so. You don't need too much. But what you want is the wire itself to actually melt the solder. You want it to heat up enough to where it kind of wicks. And now what we're going to do is we're going to wire these straight across. I just like to take my tweezers and hold the wire right above the solder joint. There we go. You want that nice shiny ball. Heat it up. That's what we're looking for. Nice, round, shiny soldering joints. The next part that I like to do is get you some double-sided foam tape here. You can see that it's got foam in between, and then you have your double-sided sticky tape. And this creates a nice barrier between the carbon and your ESC, and it also helps to hold it down. And you can see that's covering those terminals underneath. Pull back that other layer there and just kind of push down, and you can see that is now holding the ESC in place. Now cut our ESC wires to length. You see, even with the ground wire, we have definitely enough wire to get to those solder pads. Just like that. That's a nice, good soldering joint there. Nice, shiny soldering joints there for the positive and the negative of the ESC. Had to do that off camera. It was extremely difficult, but I was able to get the motor signal wire soldered and the ESC telemetry wire soldered. And moving forward on this build, I'm going to use this tip right here, which is a very fine point soldering tip, because these joints are just way too small. Even for this is considered a fine point tip here, but you can see the difference between the two. And this one on the right definitely will be better for those smaller pads. I have to solder the ground wire here. I'm going to solder this to the ground of the ESC. Went ahead and got our ESC completely wired up, and we're going to do the same thing for the remaining three, but I'll do that off camera, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. But you can see we've got our 3 motor wires soldered here. We have our ground of our ESC and ground of our signal here. Over here we have our positive wire of the ESC. We have our motor signal wire here, and we have our ESC telemetry wire here on the RX pad. Now you can see we got all 4 ESCs installed, and the hardest part honestly was just the telemetry wire and the signal wire. The pads are very small in this flight controller, but I'm happy with the way it looks. And I got my 2 zip ties on each ESC. They're just the smaller zip ties, but as you can see, they're very well secure. And yeah, so that's it. If you got any questions, leave them down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And in the next coming series in the budget baturation, we'll be doing the camera, the VTX, and the receiver. Thanks so much, guys. Edrone out.